And I would say that today we are in a multi-dimensional situation as opposed to a vertical situation. And if you're an expert today, I think you're at risk by being replaced by AI or severely impacted by AI, where being more horizontal and more multidimensional, you will be able to utilize what used to be called soft skills, I should say, which today I call them power skills.
The Industrial Revolution, that's making everything standard. And because we have all this standard for everything's became black and white. It's actually been affecting so much the wine business because you have this standard, how to speak, how to say things. One of the reasons I did not pass my WSET 4, they told me like the feedback they gave to me is because I did not speak sophisticated enough.
Ironically, I took the WSAT, I have a WSAT 2, and I purposely took it to learn how not to talk like that. I wanted to create different language for the wine industry. Tech speaks in speeds and feeds. At Apple, they don't talk like that. Even to this day, they rarely ever talk about speeds and feeds. It's always a different kind of language and a different kind of conversation that comes out of Apple. The rest of the industry is still playing in the speeds and feeds game. We're not static, we're constantly evolving. So why shouldn't our communication of who we are evolve as we evolve? Why does it need to stay static? Somebody's got to break through and, step aside from all the traditional constraints that they've put on themselves.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for listening or watching one more episode of Vino Visionaries. Today, we have a very different podcast. We're not going to necessarily talk about the pains or the different visions inside how we can solve the problems of the wine industry on the way most people thinking about it. We're going to bring a different perspective. It's about the narrative of identities, of the narrative of what we believe we are in the wine industry, to understand a little bit the psychology or the neuroscience is happening in the wine industry. And for this episode, I want to talking a little bit beyond of the same talk or the same noise what we have been saying and reading and listening in the wine industry. I bring someone for me is have a lot of experience about it, so I admire so much because someone is actually helping me as well with a lot of the talks and newsletter to understand the things I did not understand on these last 2 years. And I wanted to introduce to you all Toby. He's a different title is narratologist. Toby, do you want to explain people what that title is? Because I don't know if many people really know what narratologist it is.
Well, I'm honored to be here today, and it's been great, talking with you over the last couple of years and watching you evolve with the project you're working on. Yeah, to answer your question, it is a made-up title. Several years ago, I got hired by a PR firm to help them figure out how to address the demise or the shrinking nature of earned media as Facebook and the whole social media world was evolving. And we started a project way back in 2014 that lent itself to the idea of narrative as kind of the glue or the foundation behind how we could make earned media stick a little better than the way it was being done. And I became the chief narrative officer behind this idea that we created. And one thing led to another. And over the course of, doing this for about 10 years now, actually 11, wow, 12, I evolved into the idea of being a narratologist. It's a craft. So I figured I would give it an identity. And so that's how it landed.
I love it because you just follow your path. You don't try to just buy your path from the supermarket. I am this or I'm that. I try to fit and some of like in some of the titles, you just really figured out your own path. This is I admire that, because I try to figure out my own path, but I don't even know how to call myself these days. People ask me like,
Well,
what do
most
you
of
do?
us,
It's like, I
yeah.
always have a different answer because I can't really figure it
Well,
out.
most of us have a title, right? And we our identity is tied to the title we have at work, which we use to describe ourselves. But typically, when you're in a social setting and someone, asks what you are, and you say, "I'm vice president of marketing," it's like, "Oh, okay." And then they move on, or they keep going. Next question. But when someone asks what you do, and you say, "I'm a narratologist," then they're like, "Well, what is that? And what do you do?" Right? So the whole purpose was to get the next question and keep the conversation flowing.
I think I'm gonna do something similar. I'm gonna figure out what's mine. Toby,
A winetologist. There
Toby,
we go.
wine colleges. I'm not sure if that's gonna fit. Probably something with rethinking, or I don't know. Toby, I wanted to ask you something. I have been following you, following on your newsletter. I love what you bring to the table. You've been working in the wine industry as well. You know all the things. You know everything that's happening inside of the wine industry. For me, you very complementary skills, because you understand the beyond of the problems. You understand as well some of the things that actually need to happen to be able to move it forward, the whole industry. Um, so my next question, before we end up in talking more deep inside of the wine industry, is about you, because you have a shifty story to tell. So just to let everyone knows, and Toby as well, he has built since July last year a company in literally shifty stories. And he's gonna explain a little bit what this exactly means. It's not necessarily the story. It's a story about what you believe, more than just a story made by sell a product. We're gonna through this kind of what he does, but also I wanted to you explain a little bit more about this, but also engaging in your own personal shift story. What is your personal shift story, Tommy?
Well, I think it is in perpetual shift mode. I find as I'm getting older, my quest for learning is getting more assertive, or bigger. I wished I would have had this when I was in my 20s in college. I could have applied myself better. But I think with the advance of AI, being a very curious person, I'm all in, and I'm enamored with what's possible using a variety of AIs today. And so that is definitely shifting my story, because I tend to play on the edge of technology with the kind of companies I deal with. And so I'm usually helping companies to name or claim a category that may or may not exist. And then you have to help them to define what it is. And then you have to create the language that allows it to be communicated in a simplified, graspable manner. Um, so it's fascinating to be able to work with companies in that context. And then that kind of parlayed itself into the executive world just as COVID was hitting. So, right about that time, as COVID hit all of us, I was like, wow, everyone's going to need to reimagine themselves, because this is changing the game for all of us, right? And I had an executive who approached me to help her get back to the mountaintop, so to speak. So she was a world-class energy economist who shaped uh, energy policy at the country level. She lived in London. She worked in the developing world, so mostly, Africa, states within Africa. And then she had to come home and care for, I believe her dad had a stroke, and her mom was struggling to care for her
Oh,
dad. So she came home, to help with that situation. And then her dad recovered, and then her mom ended up becoming ill. And the next thing you know, it was 7 years, and she wasn't doing what she wanted to do. And she wanted to get back to where she was, but she couldn't tell her story. And she had a TED talk. I'm like, well, you already told your story. You have a TED talk, And she just couldn't get it out and couldn't break through. And so, as I was primarily working with companies at the time, I really hadn't been working on executives. Uh, she asked if I could take her on. And I'm like, well, I think what I do will apply. It'll just transfer over, same kind of principles. So let's see. And then as we started going down that path, COVID hit. So I had to reimagine everything, like all of us did. And then she was at a place in time where she was willing to, do something different. And as opposed to being a coach or a mentor, I really kind of brought over this idea of narrative and solving for resistance, uh, creating stories that pull people towards you as opposed to pushing your story out on people. And one of the things that was fascinating was when we asked her, well, how do you do what you do? And then she just like exploded, and the idea that she was an energy economist who wrote energy policy. She would go into the village and she would, talk to the female of the house who was cooking with wood, and she cooked with wood, but she had access to energy, but she still cooked with wood because the man of the household liked the flavor of the wood on his food. So hence, she was using that as her fuel. And then, as you can imagine, you run out of wood, and then you have to go fetch more wood. So effectively, she had her kids uh, start to go fetch the wood because they'd have to go deeper and deeper into the forest. And ultimately, uh, what she realized was that she wasn't solving for energy. She was solving for, poverty and gender inequality, because the kids
oh, that's cool.
weren't were they're losing out on education because they were fetching wood, right? So, and then as she was telling this story, it's like, a man would not have done that. you know he would not have gone into the village and got, in to the situation that she got into. And as she was explaining all this, we're like, oh my God, you're like the Jane Goodall of energy. And she's like, she's my mentor. And then boom, it exploded. And then her, her story fell into place. It just became like this natural fit. And then that launched this whole idea that led to this current version called Shift Story.
So that's how the your path to get to understand your biggest potential of yourself. Okay, that's actually was a shifty story too for you, I guess,
Yeah.
because you just discovered a new talent of yourself. You did not realize that before.
No, because I mean, like, I've led teams. I worked in large companies, Fortune 100s, Fortune 500s. I've done 6 startups, co-founding executive team. So I was just doing the normal, work in a company, climb the ladder. And then when I was at Time Warner, we helped to launch Pathfinder, which was arguably the beginning of the internet. Um, and I kind of saw this whole thing evolving, and I'm like, I have to dive in. And at that point, I left the traditional media world and dove into the internet, moved to Silicon Valley, and then got involved in the crazy digital world. So I argue that I am a digital native, even though that is not the definition of digital native. But hey, if I was there first or one of the early pioneers, like, why can't I claim that, right? Um, So yeah, then evolving this into this whole narrative structure, that all kind of happened somewhere in the 2014 range when that PR firm called. Um, and then as digital kind of kept evolving, you could really see how the shift was happening with the media world that I came from, and then who really kind of owned the media, what was media. And you fast forward to today, media is not owned by media is owned by tech companies. So how we get our
Yes.
news, right, is now a mess. Um, and if you really lean into the whole idea of AI, it's large language models. So it's basically driven by language, which is kind of where the whole narrative element comes in. So it's been fun to evolve with the speed of change. Um, and then when you take that back to the human, we haven't evolved as fast as the technology is evolving. And I think right now a lot of people are kind of struggling with, groundedness in what, as the ground's moving and the stars are realigning, like, what do you focus on today? And that's an area of fascination for me.
You made me remember a story of this week. I was presenting a seminar for the Australian Wine Research Institute, and one of the researchers told me, I really wanted to do something. It's different, who motivated me and like do my own thing and something and I guess like what she said, it's try to find it their own path. I feel like we're going towards a desire of be find their own path more than before. And I think that's when you understand your narrative and remember who you are. Because people think that you need to change it for something they don't know. But the reality is something is already you, like your natural talent. Because your story, how I interpret it, you always been good on that. But things is you let things happen to your life. You open the door. So let things happen in your life and they go with the flow. Learning different things you did not care about to learn something new. Nothing stop you to take the opportunity you have on the table. So that's how you shift what you was doing to do something different and you discover your natural talents. I guess interpreted your story and like my takeaway from this, it's really be open, like probably little neuroplasticity, to not be have that fear of the to do something you never done because you never done, you don't know the results. Um, but do you think that is one of the problems people can't find their own path, like the no title thing? Like,
Well,
what's your thoughts on that?
ironically, I just was interviewed by a gal named Lexi Martin, who has created this site called redirecting.work. And she writes about people's pivots. And she's a researcher by trade. I met her. She was a client a couple years ago in the uh, future of work field, and her company was a people analytics company, and she was kind of the researcher behind that whole thing. And one of the things we just talked about in this notion of pivoting and the pivot types of that you go through, or she's done 90 of these interviews now, so she's really been able to kind of organize people by the type of pivot they do and how they go about it. Some people cocoon and you know uh, kind of have to find themselves, and other people just dive in, get messy, and burn their fingers and keep going. um, and we talked about the idea of growing up in corporate world. um, I was always like a horizontal kind of person, like more of a spatial kind of person than a vertical expert kind of person. So I always ran cross current in large organizations. So I was like, as I say, a salmon upstream most of my life. Um, and everyone was very vertical. It was very performative. You're incented to perform in a certain way. And here I was, more connective tissue ambassador, pull it together, connect dots. Um, there was always concessions, and my
You're
job,
not on the linear thinking. You build the non-linear
I was
thinking. So you,
totally nonlinear. And so that's just how my brain was wired. And then I probably added fuel to that. And then here we are again today. Back then it was an argument of like, who's better off, the specialist or the generalist? And there was always an argument. And today we're having that same argument. And I would say that today we are in a multi-dimensional situation as opposed to a vertical situation. And if you're an
Mhm.
expert today, I think you're at risk by being replaced by AI or severely impacted by AI, where being more horizontal and more multidimensional, um, you will be able to utilize what used to be called soft power, which I today uh, call or soft skills, I should say, which today I call them power skills. So the ability to communicate, the ability to articulate, um, I think those are really meaningful skills that an AI will not be able to take over, at least in its current form. But that brings us back to hospitality, right? The people that kind of have a relationship and can have a conversation while they're pouring wine, um, which is what I did for 5 years. Um,
Mhm.
you meet people where they are, as opposed to being this scripted thing where you use wine speak and throw out all the WeSat language. Ironically, I took the WeSat. I have a WeSat too, and I purposely took it to learn how not to talk like that. So I probably, I probably shouldn't say that publicly, but yeah, I mean, I wanted to create different language for the wine industry. And one of the languages that I ended up creating was called wine lyrics. And I worked with a couple wineries to try to get them to utilize this language in place of typical wine speak. And I could not get it to the finish line. It just, we got so close, and then they got cold feet and they pulled back. And
Oh my
so it
God.
was like, that was frustrating.
Well, I was like, you just remind me of a conversation yesterday I had with a friend, my husband. Um, he was talking about how standard we have everything. Standard how we dress up, standard how we walk, standard how we speak, standard how we do this, standard how we do that, standard for what is good, standard for what is bad, standard. We have this all is standard for everything, and and then that is something I want to talk to you because there is an anthropology. His name is, I think, is it Jeremy Riffinson,
Hmm.
who is talking about this standard word building by since the revolution. That was the biggest revolution we have in the whole world, like the industrial revolution. So that's making everything standard. And because we have all this standard for everything, everything became black and white. And suddenly became everything so bad. you know. And that's something I have been asking myself with really, and I think that's probably what's the big change is happening now with the decentralization, is because it's not black and white anymore. It
Yeah.
can be purple, can be yellow, can be, and I think that it changed. People don't realize this much. It's actually been affecting so much the wine business and and business in general, but the business and the wine business, and when you talk about language, it's because you have this standard to how to speak, how to say things. One of the reasons they did not pass my West at 4, they told me like the feedback they gave to me is because I did not speak sophisticated enough. So literally they wrote that. That's the phrase that they words. I need to be more sophisticated when I write. Putting my point more sophisticatedly or something like that. Um, so I was not sophisticated. I'm not a sophisticated gal, by the way. Everyone is listening. This like seems like I'm
You're
not.
very sophisticated.
And then that is the standard of how we speak about wine, how we should talk about wine. And it became that as the standard. If someone says something different, is always looking bad, is looking different, and you can't don't do this way or that way because it's the standard. And then I think it's coming really this thinking around the whole world became pretty much from that revolution when you reading the third waves of Albert Toffley. They talk about agriculture as the first wave, the second wave as a industrial revolution, and then now the information era, the third wave. That's exactly what's happening now.
Yeah, we're here.
And then you put those kind of points together, you see like how it was like that the word and the Jeremy, like the anthropology, he was right. We build the whole word thinking on standard, but now the information's breaking that standard to purple, yellow, blue, and we have now this many tribes like a mosaic.
Yeah.
That's just something
Yeah, I'm
you're using a lot.
I am yeah, I
Like
mean,
a mosaic kind of a society, and that's it. Albert Toffler as well, this futurist. I don't know if you read the book Power Shift. He talked about mosaic too, and then something I wanted to bring on the table. How do you see your society becoming mosaic? Because that is something you've been working on, and I love it. And you already see this a little while, but I think this is just becoming so clear now. We became a mosaic society.
yeah, in fact, I'm making a TED Talk as we speak, and it has to do with the idea of a living mosaic. And as you were talking, I have all these examples in my head of like language and shifts that happened. And I'll come back to mosaic, but the one thing that really struck me was way back when Pepsi, John Scully was running Pepsi, and Coke had the hourglass bottle, and they owned the category, and the hourglass bottle was everything. And then Pepsi introduced all these different packaging sizes to neutralize the hourglass bottle. And I thought that was brilliant, in the day, because they introduced the liters and the cans, and they changed the game, right? And when I think about the wine industry, you know, we're set on this 750 bottle, and I know people have tried to do splits at 375, and there's all these different packages that are out there. But I remember having this conversation with someone who in Napa had made the hexagon bottle. And I'm blanking on the name of the winery right now. Kai, I think, is the owner of it. And it made so much more sense. It was a lighter bottle. It packaged better. It carried better. It shipped better. And I don't know if it got widespread or not, but it was a different packaging talk point from the standard that you talked about. And I think as in the industry or the industrialization kind of happened, standard was a game changer in terms of for a variety of reasons. Another concept that popped in my head as you were talking was the whole notion of when Steve Jobs came back to Apple, the second time after he got fired, uh, his whole thing was
Mhm.
like, tech speaks in speeds and feeds. Like everything is speeds and feeds. And he's like, we are not going to talk like that. And so if you look at Apple, they don't talk like that. Even to this day, they rarely ever talk about speeds and feeds. It's always a different kind of language and a different kind of conversation that comes out of Apple. The rest of the industry is still, playing in the speeds and feeds game. And those are not sustainable advantages because you can always be outspeeded or outfeeded, as tech advances. And in AI, it's weekly. So it seems like the wine world still speaks in speeds and feeds in its version of that, right? Um, and somebody will come along and have the wherewithal to speak differently and talk differently. And I think in this current situation where we have the supply, demand challenges and the industry itself is challenged, somebody's got to break through and, step aside from all the traditional constraints that they've put on themselves. Um, and I think, well, you're obviously pioneering that. So it just take a few, and then the dominoes will start falling, and then the herd will start to follow. Uh, and in my frustration of trying to work in the wine world since 2004, when I was at AOL and I came and knocked on the door, and for 2 years, I knocked on the door in Napa, and they were like, "Why are you here?" And I was like, "I have 30 million credit cards on file. Like, we should be able to do something, right?" Um, and it was always trying to get a first mover to make a move. And ironically, movements tend to happen when the second and the third follower happens, not necessarily the first mover. So we definitely need a few dominoes to fall. But so back to your question on Mosaic, and this all kind of does tie together a little bit. Um, I think one of the things that you talked about with identity and some of the stuff we talked about before we got on air here, um, is I believe as a person, we are a compounding nature of who we are. So everything is additive. And it's not like we do have identities over the course of our life stages as we change. We become a parent. Once you become a mom, that shifts things. Um, but who you were before you were a mom doesn't go away. They kind of still linger in there. Um, and then as you grow up, and then where we are now, we're empty nest. Kids are gone, and all the things you did up until that point are still there. But now you're kind of in this different life stage, and I kind of metaphored what I do to be mosaic like in terms of we have all these life moments and memories. We have what Bruce Feiler calls life quakes and work quakes. A life quake may be, someone has cancer and dies, and then your whole life changes. Um, in the
Yeah.
work world, you have, you get fired or your company dies. You have a life quake, very akin to earthquakes, right? And they have reverberations. So as you go through and you have these moments and you have these memories and you have these quakes, I think they're all really just tiles. Um, and when you add them all up and put them all together and you recombinate them, um, that becomes your image and your identity. And I think as we continue to grow, um, those tiles just keep moving around and keep shifting. And in fact, that's what my TED Talk is going to be about, is the idea of a living mosaic. So if you think about, when you have a moment or a memory or a flashback, it's like a little movie goes off in your head, and you can remember that moment, or when you sniff that wine, um, for me anyway, I can transport back to where I was, who I was sitting with, and what I was eating and where I was. um, I have that memory, and I get transported back. So my vision on that is, if we're not static, we have our moments in time, and but we're not static. We're constantly evolving. So why shouldn't our communication of who we are evolve as we evolve? Why does it need to stay static? Uh, and typically that's because we have constraints that we live by, and that could be a title, could be a job description, could be a role, um, and you stay in your swim lane. Um, but that's kind of not how we operate as people. So I see that inherent tension in that. And yeah, that's where this mosaic thing kind of comes together. And it was fun to go back because I went to Ravenna, Italy, and took mosaic class with a world-class mosaicist, and we literally, built Ravenna style, which goes all the way back to the 4th century, and then modern style. And while I was there, I got to go visit all the cathedrals and the basilicas, and you just realize, this is like an ancient craft that's been with us for, 2,000-3,000 years, and that was how they told their stories back then. And today you throw AI against that, and they should be more fluid, and more morphing than what we did back then, because we didn't have that kind of capacity.
Very interesting points, because you, for me, you talk about neuroplasticity a little bit, because the time you're putting things new on the mosaic, and let some other, make another points to tell who you are. It's kind of the neuroplasticity idea behind. So people doesn't know neuroplasticity when you allow new information come to your mind, and changing you some beliefs, that one you believe, and that's how you progress, by having new information up, by get the same information more and more and more. And I tell this in my own experience. For a long time in my life, everything I read, everything I talk, everything was studying was one thing: terroir, soils. And I had this in my mind. If I work in the wine industry, I have to always have all those kind of information memorized in my mind, and I have to know this by heart, because that's how I can show I am a good professional. That's what I believe. And that is why I did Wested, Coat of Master Sommelier, the Schola Argentina Sommelier. And then, to be honest, it's all repetitive stuff. A lot of repetitive, because it's not much new stuff between what Barolo style it is on any of those courses. It's not really something completely different perspective. It's a copy paste of each other, change a little bit the language by who gave it to you, the stuff, the subjective. But at the end of the day, was a cut off my limitation too. And I just did try to be very good memorizing those things, but I did not learn anything else. And I think my limitation of information I had, the knowledge I have, was a limitation of my mosaic, let's say it like that. My mosaic never get new stuff to rebuilding who I am. So I became the same for a long time, because everything I was doing was the same. The same kind of jobs, the same of kind of courses, the same of kind of people talking, the same. I never added new things. So from all I was involved, I changed country from Argentina to Australia. You know, I learned a different language, like English, because I came here, I did not speak English. But my environment was the same. Makes sense.
Hmm.
I could learn in different stuff. My environment was the same. So there was no big changes for me. I'm gonna tell you this is my shifty story, and you can analyze that to put that in context for just what you said. Because I feel like I take this to my own life, like what you said. And one day I received this email from the most important science national here in Australia company. Was a random email. I don't even I asked the girl, how did you find me? Just online. I just saw your website and send you emails. This is rare. And she sent me this email and it said, I think it was in 2019, something like this. 2019. And I think I received that email when they say, um, um, hello, Priscilla. We are a national science company from Australia. We're doing we speak an event in Adelaide, and we'd love to invite you to speak about cyber and AI on that event to be a speaker. And I read this email and it's like, AL. And I asked my friend, like, they want to talk about cyber AL in an event of the biggest company of national science in the whole Australia. So I like, what's that means, Brand? And then he looked at me, he's like, what? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? I don't understand what you say. And then he looked at the man and was like, Prissy, it's not AL, it's AI. Like, what? What is AI? Artificial intelligence, Priscilla. I was like, what? What are you talking about? Artificial intelligence. Like, there is artificial intelligence. What is that? I had absolutely no idea. And I told her, like, I don't think I'm the best person to speak on this event because I don't have much work or knowledge on this, but I'll find someone else to speak for you. And I called all my possible friends who could be able to speak on this event, and everybody said no. And I sent a message for one friend, and I was like, "Oh my god, I have this lady keeping telling me I should go, I should go, I should go to speak," and then I don't know what to do because I don't feel confident to talk about something I don't even know that existed 2 minutes ago. Like, and he said, "Why? You won't be able to do it? You should do it." I was just like, it's still a month and a half before the event. So I guess I can study.
And you did it?
And I did it. So I was like there's these videos in YouTube. If you see these
Oh
videos,
my
they're
God,
like
I gotta go watch that. That's awesome. That
I was like, nervous as a hell. And I was like, the whole video was like, because I was just so nervous. I have all this bunch of people who understand way more about AI and cyber than I do because I just learning a month and a half to be able to do that presentation. That's the whole time. I study every day. If you think I could, I study blockchain, I study AI, I study all those kind of things, but from the beginning, from zero, I didn't even understand blockchain at all. I was obligating myself to understand to be able to present. And the technology in agriculture, like like precise vinicultures and things like that, because I wanted to present that. So I think the way I would be able to be more comfortable to speak, but still, I did not much confidence at all to do this.
yeah.
I challenged my brain 1,000%. It wasn't 100%, it was 1,000%. Because it was something I had this zero knowledge, and I was a speaker for the most important national science company in Australia with a bunch of directors and stuff, and they look at me, who you are? I was like, Priscilla, Nice to meet you. You know, I was not direct. I was not the CEO. I was not any of those things. I was like working the salad bar doing tastings. You know, like
Well, and did it go? Did you
they're not
survived?
thinking I was like, I'm a director, I'm a CEO, I am this and that, all these important titles. I am a researcher for blah blah blah, and I'm one of these big research and things, and like everything was so outside of my own word, and I wasn't even like, can I speak here? If I speak, can I? People gonna think I'm idiot because I have absolutely no idea what these people talking about. And then they speak it like engineers and the most, most famous engineers in Australia was in this company. The most science people was the most people high end, and there was Priscilla. And the only thing she done was that coat of master mede, all those kind of things. Only thing she never studied anything else, and also she always have it done. It's the same boring language in the syllabus. That was she, and then she putting herself on the environment that was completely uncomfortable. I don't even want to talk to people. I love to talk to people. It was so uncomfortable. I don't say like people ask like what you do. It's like, well, if I know what I do, people don't even couldn't ask the next question because this is all directed, there's all CEOs, there's all people way more important in the whole Australia, and then I'm here like a salad people, and then like how you see yourself. Just say how you see yourself is really really limit you,
Well, did that unlock
and
you?
how I saw myself back then and how I see myself now is completely two different people, two different identities, two different mosaic, and this reflected so much your external too, because I was scared because for by the way I see myself, and I think that's um, what you try to do with the shift story. But you need to go into this uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, like
To be comfortable, you need to be uncomfortable.
I really don't. I work a lot across a lot of different industries, and the industry doesn't really matter to me. I'll learn it like you just exhibited, because the parameters that I use to help people get from here to there, those are pretty consistent. They're the principles of what you need to do to make it work. So I don't care if you're a fintech company out of Romania or a voice biomarker company out of Singapore or something called Shared Studios, which is a global shipping container with screens on both sides where people can talk to each other. It's the same kind of principles, and it just comes down to a little bit of each industry has nuance or language that is relevant to that industry, like wine has its version. But typically I like to be able to bring other industry knowledge into the industry I'm working on, because everyone will tell you, oh, ours is so different, ours is so unique, ours is so special, and it's just like, yeah, it's really not. Because your problem is the same problem the car company has, is the same company that the fintech company had, um, but people on many occasions don't want to hear that, because that kind of blows up a little bit of the belief, as you and I talked about, that makes what they do a little different. But yeah, it's been fascinating, because I find in this whole shift story thing that it really kind of boils down to the notion of conditions, constraints,
Mm,
and then once we kind
mm.
of get through that, we get into intentions, and then I bring this all together kind of in a mosaic tile field, if you will. Um, and then we ultimately migrate towards an environment. Are you in the right environment? Do you need to change the environment? And then we land on a manifesto. that we co-create, and that kind of becomes the blueprint for the executive. Companies are a little different, but for the executive, once we get you to the manifesto, you've already kind of unlocked a few things along the way, or discovered some false walls were put in place, some by yourself, some that are external. But then, you're going to have to figure out an intention to get beyond a constraint or a condition that is an obstacle today. And it's been
It's
fun.
stopping you to think.
Yeah, it's just been really fun to see people get unlocked and then just take off and do their thing. Um, that's kind of the joy of why I do what I do, is to see kind of the magic happen. And sometimes you can't describe why or how it happens. It just is a moment and something clicks, or some,
Aha. And then
yeah,
how moment you
it,
talk about.
yeah. And, or, I've had situations where people, had gone through the program and kind of internalized it, but it didn't quite fully make sense. And then 6 months, a year later, they come back and they're like, this all happened. Uh, and something happened 7 months after that. And it was just like, and then, they're off and running. So,
So, so the program you're offering now, Toby, just to explain to people who are watching this. So you're getting someone who has been, doing the same thing or wanted to improve themselves, so they want to go beyond the what they do it, to be able to analyze themselves, their identity, what is actually limiting them. Usually the what they limited people is they believe, but it's very hard for they realize by themselves
yeah,
because it's in your
you know,
and it's in your brain.
this is a very interesting paradox on some level. And there is a Harvard professor who wrote a book called The Strategy of the Fat Smoker. He was a well-known professor who worked with the service industries, so probably could have worked with, wine companies. Definitely worked with sales, insurance, people who were ad agencies, people who were in the service industry. And the book kind of he was a larger gentleman and he smoked. So he knew he needed to lose weight. He knew he shouldn't be smoking, but he didn't do anything about it. And then he had a heart attack. And then by crisis, he had to lose weight and he had to stop smoking. Hence, that kind of became the book, right? That a lot of companies do not move forward with things that they know they could or should be doing until it becomes a crisis. Then it becomes a fire, and then you have to react. And I think the same thing happens with executives. There's something that Whitney Johnston talks about, the S curve. And one of my shapers or mentors, Charles Handy, talks about it as the second curve. And it basically, is, as an executive and or a company, you're on a curve, right? And at some point you peak and you decline. And the smart companies and or the smart executives will realize that they uh, are at a place where they could potentially be peaking. So what they tend to do there is start a new curve. It's called an S curve or a second curve. And
Yeah, yeah,
typically you create those at a moment when everything's going really well.
good, very well.
Right? And most people won't do that. I'd say 98% or 99% of the people will not do that. They'll wait till they're on the decline. They've been fired. They hate their job so much they quit. And you're kind of nearing rock bottom. And then you start your curve. But really what you have to do is swim back up to the surface to get to the place where you were so you can build the next curve, because you're now running into friction and confidence issues and things like that. So I deal a lot with people
And start to
who,
react instead to respond. Because if you start
yes,
from where we are here and up, you're
yep,
probably moving with more comfort zone and you people are responding more
yes,
creative.
yeah, because your second
If
curve,
you're waiting to decline, if you that's my understanding. Just correct me if I'm
yes,
wrong.
yes,
If I decide to go up when I'm in this path here, I start to using my survive brain that is becoming much more reactive.
yeah, and or the story that you'd been living, right, is no longer valid. It's no longer working. Like, so what got you to here is not going to get you to there. And some people at that juncture will reach out and go, dude, it's just not working. I mean, I'm stuck, right? Um, and so I've worked with people who are at that stuck point. And then I've worked with people who've kind of, gone beyond, and they can't get rid of the story that they had, and they live kind of in the past. Um, and eventually some of those don't work. But I've been fortunate to have most of those people that I engage with, get to the other side. um, when I do get to that S curve person who realizes that I'm here and I want to go to this next level, um, those are pretty magical, because those people tend to have a lot of they're very open to what's possible, right? So with them, you're kind of pulling out a different energy level, and then you're kind of redirecting that energy into like either next, or I'm a VP here, but I want the C role of that, so what's it going to take to get to that C role? um, and it may not be in your company, right? And it may not even be in your industry. Um, so I get them. I get all kinds, um, but it's that's the fun of it. To me, that's the puzzle, the mosaic, right? Because at the end of the day, I kind of want to gather all your pieces and then lay them out and figure out, like, who are you, and what things were, rich, creative, energy oriented things that you may have parked or layered over or gave up on, and yet that ember is still the one that drives you. So if we can find that and pull it, to the surface, can we unlock you? And really, it's about unlocking, unleashing, whatever term you want to use.
I like that. I wanted to just to bring it, one more thing because it's an one almost an hour of record, but I do wanted to have two more things to talk to you because I found you a very interesting person, and I think this podcast it has been. I would love you to listen to that podcast. So I don't. I feel like that's a lot of good conversation here. Um, One thing I have to be reflected to myself, and I wanted to put your words and your thoughts on. Um, the how I shifted my own story. It's not chasing validation. I I feel like I when I worked on my previous life, where I have my own limits, what to read, what to study, what to do, what to talk, how to speak, how to work, how to dress. Everything was me thinking what other people's gonna talk, what are they gonna talk about me, what's the validation system, and the validation system for me as an example. I'm not trying to criticize the West. For more, we already told you some things here, but was always to get all these certificates. That's why I did the level one, level two, level three, even level four. And when I did not pass in the level 4, and I actually pay and asking why, and when they came with the answer, and the answer did not make sense for me, it's like, well, why am I actually doing this? So what's gonna this bring to me? Oh, that's the validation of people actually telling me something that don't even give my job because that. So is it just a validation to just prove myself I am an expert? So what actually bring it to my table? What actually bring to my life? And when I start to analyze those things, I think, well, wait a minute. This is, and it is my aha moment coming when I watching. I love your haha moment. Was watching the deep thinking on the story of Dennis Asabi of AGI, an artificial general intelligence, a super intelligence. If you people here don't know what that means, the story how he's building that. And one of the things that fits in my mind from the whole movie, he was telling how he trained it. He was training the AGI. He was training the AGI by reward as much they fail exploring new things they never have done. And that's how AGI became more clever than another chess player. They bought the best chess player in the world. So the AGI play with him and then win and much quicker and much in very speed in moment. But because the training was by fail, progress, fail, progress, fail, progress. Not because they was looking the past the validation, past the validation, past the validation, past the validation. And it was for me was my that's explain why things is actually because it not and you know my story. I have been through a lot of rejection and a lot of the things I said that as well, and even the things I thought was right. I it was fail was not really but that's how helped me to progress too. If I
Yeah.
never had these little fails, little talks, little things I was thinking back then, I probably never get the progress. So and that's the thing I think we reinvest the way we're thinking. And I wanted to get your thoughts about that because you are very good on neuroscience and psychology. But when you're watching that, and I saw this like, well, when I don't try to be on the validation, just try to try new things, I actually feel the progress much quicker than was try to just do the things I know it's gonna be validated by the thing, but also it's look in the past, never look in the future.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I deal with a lot of startups in this tech world, and then the whole funding phenomenon of who gets funded and whatnot. And there's a lot of people that have been successful who don't really know how they were successful. Like it just everything fell into place, or it worked well, or you worked for Google, or you worked for Facebook. You had nothing to do with it other than luck of being there, and then you get hired by someone else, and when the going gets tough, you kind of didn't have those scars to rely on. And in fact, one of the my clients right now is a female CEO who came up through that world as a founder. Now she's running a public company, and one of the things she had to do a lot of financial maneuvering in order to keep this company going. And she literally the other day was in this interview, and she was just saying, had I not been a founder of a startup where I had to scramble to figure out like how I was going to meet payroll, or I had to, you know, kill something in order for something else to live, those are like very lived experiences. So as she was dealing with a bunch of governance and funding issues and things that got really hairy, she had that founder experience to rely on. And if you hadn't gone through that, you may not have survived, the current situation that was requiring you to dig deep and come up with some solution that may have been out of the box. Um, and because you had to
Mm,
live out of the box before that, it wasn't new. It was a muscle memory. Um, so I think you
mm,
learn a lot from failures and rejections. Unfortunately, a lot of our incentive and behavior programs are so performative that you're not allowed to fail, or you have an exit when you fail, and really that's probably when you learn the most, is when you
yes.
hit the wall or hit a dip. So
Yeah, I agree. And then I think people don't realize that's the program. I really felt my brain is a program. So I talk a lot of these people may think I'm crazy, but I do think this is a program. And if my program is always fair, like you have a fear of the fail to do something or be on that thing, you always are gonna be freezing, or always are gonna looking back to the past and keeping myself in the past. And I think that's something I wanted to the takeaway of people today for all this conversation. Um, it's like we're moving towards the future, and the future is very uncertainty. We have more things happening than ever. The technology in China is getting 10G. If people don't know that, in Australia, it's only 5. It's halfway through, but the China is already moving very fast. In America as well, US, yeah, where you are, that became a big potential, and it brings new things, and in this race of and the AGI, the artificial general intelligence, who's going to bring it? That's one knows everything in the world, and all those things is happening, and it's such a accelerated way. We most people don't even think about it, and they're gonna change perception, informations, who you are, identities, what we believe it was true, because it's gonna bring you different realities to the table too. That's what AI is gonna bring it. So, and then I think my takeaway is like be open, I guess, to may not be right, to may have failed, to may not work out, to be take the responsibility for and then be human. Like we all know, we know perfect to do know, we all always have the right answer or doing the right thing. And sometimes we just need to understand where we are, we react, what we did, and sometimes we need to learn to relearn something new, and that's okay too. I guess what I wanted to bring for this episode is just the takeaway is just to be exactly what you have been said the whole podcast, be open mind, to be able to go from here to your next level, to next unlock things. Like just to make sure you're not putting a wall in your life that doesn't even exist. It's just a belief, and a belief is just information, and that information you can reprogram. I think if you see our brain like that, we much easier for us to not be stuck and in your thoughts and in your brain or what we believe and who we are. Because the world is going too fast. We have no idea what's going to happen in a year time. We have no the prediction is very unclear, because we don't even know what the people in Silicon Valley is going to bring in anytime soon to us, and what's going to change your lives. So I think that is my takeaway for today. And then from that takeaway of this podcast, I wanted to ask you the 3 last pieces of advice for people who are paying to do that shifty story, to go to unlock the next potential for themselves. what they should do it, what they should do, how they can even start it if you wanted to start. But just the pieces, 3 pieces of advice we ask for every single person who comes to the podcast. So that's how they can reflect on, they think about themselves, and they can move forward from that.
Yeah, you know, the way I started Shift Story, or the way I start my shift stories, is with a walk and talk. So my prior version had an assessment that you would assess yourself for your narrative, what you thought it was, and then I'd have 6 of your peers assess what they thought your narrative was, and you could start to see the gap between how you see yourself versus how others see you. That's still a very valid approach, but I have found in this walk and talk, and I've done these globally. I've had 22 of these now all over the world. You walk where you are, I walk where I am. So for the Aussie world, you're doing your 8:30 and I'm doing my 4:30 p.m. almost exactly as we're doing this
Yeah.
podcast. And I lead you through with a few prompts, but it's very conversational. And it's amazing what happens when you're walking and you're talking. There's just a fluidity that happens with that, and a vulnerability that happens, and there's no recording, so it's really just a safe space. And it's like two strangers having a dialogue about something that you can't really have with your spouse or your significant other because they're tired of it, or your friends are tired of it, or you could hire some professional, psychologist or something. But I found that these walk and talks are like this really cool space that allows this connection to happen. And then the people that choose to go forward into Shift Story, it kind of sets the tone. And I think what happens from an advice perspective is, you know, you have to understand that you need to have this sense of adaptability, because you're going to now have to adapt to situations that are coming at you really fast. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and you know that there is the certainty is kind of no longer there, and the ground you stand on is kind of no longer solid. So I think we're all a little bit
Mm.
unmoored, and I think the idea of being adaptable, and then the idea of, the only thing you really can control is you and how you show up.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
so you're going to have a lot of externality pressures that you may or may not be able to adapt to. And then you're going to have internal challenges, be it financial or relationship or whatever. But I think if people learn to understand who they are and how, uh, you know, what drives them or what gets them up in the morning. I know there's a lot of that stuff's cliche-ish, but there is definitely an ember in all of us that burns, and many times we've layered it like an onion, or it's been dressed up and we forgot about it, or we didn't have the confidence to pursue it. So I think it's being open to new, being adaptable, and then the other word I am using quite often now is conviction. So once you do kind of discover this opening or this pathway, to have a sense of conviction to keep going. I think the post 2 posts ago, I wrote something about stick to itness, and
Mm-hmm.
I view that in you. Like, you have had a lot of turbulence and resistance with what you're doing, but your stick to itness is getting you through that storm, and I can see you coming out kind of the other end, still not necessarily knowing what it's going to look like, but you're pursuing
Yes.
you're pursuing it, right? And that's where the adaptability part comes in, because you'll adapt because we'll get through a certain supply demand issue. Um, and I was having this conversation with Nick the other day about, you know, I spent 20 years working in the automotive industry, and if you think about the car, it's a 5-year life cycle, right? Between the design and it showing up in the showroom. It's been compressed a little bit now, maybe to 4 years, but AI is
Wow.
compressing everything, right? Like crushing it down to maybe like 36 months. Or will the automotive world eventually get to an on-demand car where you'll just pick and choose all your pieces and it will get built and it'll be at your house in 30 days, 60 days. We're heading
Never thought about this. Today.
we're heading to that, right? I remember Peter Drucker when he was still alive. God, it had to be 80s, late 80s, 90s, early 90s. He was at a JD Power conference, and when he spoke, he sat in a chair on stage. You could hear a pin drop, because everyone was very focused on what he had to say. And he basically talked about, at one point, the automotive industry will just become system integrators of various parts, uh, where certain brands or badges will become experts at their parts, and then you as the consumer will order your car based on the best of the parts, and then whoever gets the badge on the hood, be it a Honda, Toyota, Mercedes, whatever, they'll be the final integrator of that. And I'll never forget when he said that, because that was what, 30 years ago plus now. And we're almost there with AI and blockchain and all the advances you talked about. uh, Someone will do it. I mean, you look at BYD in China right now. um, there was just a review about how they uh, do their in-car experience. And when you're on the dash, you're turning on your air conditioning at home, you're making payments with your, WeChat. You're doing all the things that are your life from the car. And in America, it was a fight to own the experience of the cockpit and who owned the dash, right? It was Google, Apple versus the OEM and their version. And BYD doesn't even think like that. They basically surround it to your life and how you run your life. And the car is just an extension of your life. And we talk about it here in the US that way, but we don't do it that way. So, you think about the wine industry, right? I mean, you're on if you rip out the vines, it's a 5 to 7 year cycle, and you have to anticipate
Mm.
the trends ahead of time. And you can graft over and do that. So maybe you can switch it out and compress that time. But um, I think there's an interesting analogy between the automotive life cycle and the wine life cycle.
This is something to reflect it because the way I feel like the information changed what we believe is right, is truth, is luxury, is prestige, is what's value, what's not value. Um, and it seems like in the car, we almost can adapt easier than the wine because it's a product who have it is some of process of vineyard waiting for the fermentation process is a much more natural way of doing it. I think how we adapted, like the expectations of the new world we're going through this faster than ever, and this policing era, like Thomas Friedman talking about, like many things happen at the same time, like explosion, and it change everything. Like in geopolitics, because AI technologies and whatever. And so, and it changed everything like overnight. That's what M. Webb described, like in using the chapter way to explain economics. as the creative disruption. That's pretty much what we're going through now. Like when something new coming is almost make the other stuff completely irrelevant. And then so we need to make sure our business and models and changing constantly. It's not one day I can change. No, it's changing constantly. And when you're talking about wine, there is these natural limitations. We needed to find out that maybe going to be the value of wine in the end. Um, but I think beyond that, I think there is the mindset too. Um, because if you don't admit, you don't face that's the real world we live in. It's like this story you're talking about, like, it's always your brain try to find the information that tell you don't need to do anything. Just wait. It's gonna happen. It's gonna pass. It's things is gonna come back as a normal. And if your brain tries to go into this path, you're probably gonna stay prison.
Well,
Um,
one thing.
and then you what if you look in the past too much, you need to look the past for learn. But if you're looking for the past to find you are right, I don't know how we can see progress in that. Like the story in the Bible, who talking about that this angel said like he run from the wall and don't look at back. And the I think it's law was in the Genesis. And then this wife look at back and it became like a statue. Like it stayed like she could be like state. I said I don't know in English. It stayed like it's a salty state, so she could not keep it going, keep it running. She just freezing. And I think the more you're looking back to find the answer, more you're freezing. That's my point to take like analogy. So she was freezing, so she would not moving forward, and she's even not moving back. She was in the middle of everything in this story. She became a state like a salty state. So I think it's kind of if you're looking too much the back to find the answers, you may not be able to move forward. And that's my takeaway from what you said.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've definitely covered a lot of ground today.
Anyway, so thank you so much, Toby, for the advices and for the adapted, talking, putting things in, in places and explain how we can really our brain is neuroplasticity always you can be able to shift the story. You'll be able to see yourselves in different ways. We always be able to build the next unlocking potentials. That's the normal and expected of the human brain is unlock potentials. It is actually what you bring it to the table is just to help them to unlock their own potential. That's it's very cool. um, Thank you so much for giving all your expertise, for people really, understand the reality. It's interpreted. So you always can interpret it in a different way and unlock your next potential. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. And I'm rooting for the wine industry because I still enjoy a good bottle of good wine. So I'm all about it.